Welcome to Kick 'em in the Head, a podcast that takes an inside look at the world of mixed martial arts, featuring interviews with some of the top fighters from South Africa and around the world, with a focus on the EFC and UFC promotions. I'm your host, Yaw. Join us as we delve deep into the techniques, strategies, and mindsets of these world-class athletes, learning from their experiences and gaining insights into what it takes to succeed in the toughest sport on earth.
Welcome to the Kick 'em in the Head podcast. And as always, we have an absolutely jam-packed MMA show for you. And today I have, like always, maybe we'll see, Lucindiso, the absolute UFC legendary fan. Welcome to Kick 'em in the Head. As always, Lou, how you doing?
I love the intro, man. Appreciate it. Always good being here. All good. Exciting times ahead. Exciting times
Fantastic.
past week. Exciting times ahead.
So you've been well this past week. Anything interesting happened on your side?
I mean, from an MMA side, there's actually a lot that's happening. Obviously, we won't touch on anything before we get into the show. But yeah, good week, But I think from a fight perspective, we're seeing a lot of activity in respective MMA communities. I'm not going to touch on some of the stuff we're touching on the show, but one thing that's quite interesting and what we're seeing quite evidently is Dricus is becoming more and more of a superstar in the country. He's getting a lot of airtime. He's doing a lot of media, and that's influencing a lot of the kids, a lot of the social networks, a lot of how people are talking about the sport, which kind of touches on my topic that we spoke about last week about how we just destigmatize certain aspects of MMA. And so it's good to see slowly but surely getting the work in.
Amazing. Then, as you said, let's get into it. This past weekend, as we discussed last week, was Ace Fighting Championship 2, the second installment of the Ace Fighting Championship, and they had a lot of fights. And as we said, it's Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, and MMA. Demar Penne, as you see there, he was the lead. He was heading everything up. He was amazing. And the fights were really interesting. From what I could tell, the Muay Thai fights apparently were not the greatest Muay Thai fights. It was more kickboxing fights than Muay Thai, but that just shows that there's a space for us to actually improve the level and skill level of Muay Thai in South Africa. But that's no biggie because that's just one discipline, one skill set you can have as an MMA practitioner. The MMA fights were very interesting. There was a few good amateur fights there, although for the most part, maybe the matchmaking can get a little bit better because there were a few fights where fighters were bulldozed, and you don't always want to see that in the fight. You want to see a good fight. You want to see two people whose skill levels are at the same level. I mean, imagine me going up against Volkanovski, who we will be talking about later on. I mean, as much as he's a shorter fighter, I'd still definitely lose because that would be poor matchmaking. So that's, I think, one aspect that could have improved. But other than that, Ace Fighting Championship 2 was phenomenal, fantastic, and definitely worth attending. So for anyone who didn't attend, definitely make sure you get out to the next Ace Fighting Championship they're looking to have probably sometime in April. But as far as it goes and as far as amateur competitions go, it was pretty decent. I'm not sure if you've seen any of the footage that's come out of Ace Fighting Championship 2 so far.
Yeah, bits and pieces. I think to your point, I mean, it's a fresh, young, organization, and there's room to improve. Obviously, as you've noted, but for me, I always, it's the hardest step is always the first step, and they've taken the first step and they've taken a second step now. So we will see them improve. We will see them getting better. It's what it also does, and kind of puts a spotlight on and highlights is how difficult it is, to have, to put on a show of a UFC or even PFL or Bellator caliber. You see it and you always are pointing fingers and critics and looking at EFC or whatever, but it shows how there's so much that goes into it. But we wish the Ace Championship all the best. We are rooting for them. As you always say, the Kick 'em in the Head podcast is a friend of them, and we always want to see people who talk in the same language in our country progress, higher and higher.
Speaking of progress, one thing that they definitely did that's amazing, and for me is really what the tournament was about, was that they were addressing the issues of fighter pay. Why? Because every winner on the card got some prize money. They got something. It might not have been colossal. It might not have been, retirement money, but it's very important to show people that if you come and fight for us, you will get remunerated. You won't just be putting your body on the line just for entertainment. This is a professional organization. And with that sort of approach, that then brings in the more skilled fighters. And as you said, that's how they then grow from step to step, from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. Next thing you know, at Ace 10, we've got Volkanovski. He's definitely going to be a theme in this show.
Would that not be a dream?
Oh, that would definitely be a dream. So, yeah, like you said, phenomenal to see the fact that they've gone through the pain of creating the event and actually getting to the point of hosting something that colossal, despite all the challenges. Amazing tournament, and I'm sure all the fighters are very grateful for the fact that getting paid for something when you're an amateur is very, very, very important.
Agreed. I mean, it's a big first step for them addressing the elephant in the room, by looking at that fighter pay and taking it on, head on, and by doing that, again, as you say, you're attracting the fighters, you're getting better fighters on your roll, and then from that you get a better quality of matchup, you get a better product that comes out. So it's a great first step to a lot of good things that I see coming from them because of them addressing that pertinent issue.
Phenomenal. Now, next thing that we're going to talk about is Hermansson versus Pyfer Fight Night. We spoke about it in brief. We talked about a few of the fights that we were looking forward to, and I think personally the Fight Night did definitely deliver for me. Yes, we didn't have big names. Yes, we didn't have headline names, but it was one of those fight nights where we had a lot of those sleeper fights with insane knockouts, very specifically one that we'll talk about. But how did you find the Fight Night?
To be honest, Yao, it's what I was saying to you. I actually found it surprisingly entertaining. For me, so maybe to take a step back, I like to watch MMA for the intricacies, for the skill set, for looking at how people go about executing game plans, and and all the stuff, the little bit of stuff around it. Like, you had some good coaches, backing their teams, not teams, their fighters. Nixick was had a couple of fighters, and Henry Hooft, that's the name I'm looking for. Henry Hooft had a couple of fighters as well. So all around packaged well. I think the matchups were actually very good. I mean, we can get into it a little bit, but I enjoyed watching the fights. I enjoyed watching. I mean, we'll get into the matchups now, but it was a good card for me, surprisingly good. Especially if you think about what Fight Night was. Before, if you remember my comment from last week about how they have sleeper fights, and it's where you get battle tested so that we can see if you're good enough to put on a prelim or early prelim, maybe main card if you make a name for yourself. But
I think let's get into the matchup.
Was actually very good. Some of this matchmaking was very good.
Let's get into those matchups. On the prelims, which fight stood out for you? For me, I definitely have to say Bolaji Oki versus Timothy Kwamba. And I think the other fight was Zach Porga versus Bogdan Gustov. Mostly because Guskov looks like Anthony Smith.
Yeah, that's actually a good call. Yeah, like it's almost like there's an AI, remake of Anthony Smith. But yeah, I mean, for me, those were the Max Griffiths was a I enjoy. Yes, it was a decision fight, but he kind of went about his business and showed his skill set to a certain extent. Yeah, Bolaji was also a good fight. I agree, as well, and obviously, the TKO from Carlos. I can't remember his surname.
Pacino.
Yeah. So some Pratis.
Marcin
I can't remember,
Pacino.
but yeah, it was. So again.
Oh, Carlos Pratis.
Yeah,
versus
Carlos
Trevin
Prates. Yeah,
Giles.
sorry, I forgot the surname. Yeah, so it was a good, again, very good fights, enjoyable to watch. I think it was, the matchmakers put on a good show for us.
Question: do you think Griffin won, or do you? Because for me, if I looked at the fight, Wells took it. As much as Griffin came out afterwards and he said that Sal Diamato, every time Sal Diamato is judging and he's fighting, Diamato scores points against him. But from the fight that I watched, I give it to Wells. So for me, the fact that Griffin won was a bit surprising, and then the fact that he was then blaming a judge for him not winning, I'm like, sorry, for a judge for scoring against him, I'm like, but did you even win the fight, bro?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a touchy subject, and it's always it's a topic on its own, I would say. Judging and scorecards. Um, so I try to stay away from them because again, it's almost like what I was talking about, in the previous topic about, looking at a Bellator and PFL and saying, and pointing fingers and saying, oh, you can't do this right, you can't do this right. Whereas it's also a difficult seat to be in to make those decisions, So, I try to, it's always difficult to have those, but I think it's a separate conversation on its own. But I my view on it is, to try and not taint, the hard work of both men. I get it, and he's got the dub, and let him keep his dub and move on, and the other fighter can only grow from that. It's one of those things that, yes, it's a sore point if you feel like you've lost, but I think it's important, as with life, that you sometimes, get a call that doesn't go according to how you feel, and you have to pick yourself up and go to the gym the next day and push on. It's like Kobe says, you play a game, you score the winning points, you go back to gym the next day. You don't score the winning point, you go back to gym the next day. You carry on with your process, and you push on, and you get better and better. It's really that simple. The focusing on judges and kicking them, while they're down, perhaps is something that is very difficult for me to do, because it's a tough, occupation to do. There's so many things that come into it, and it's interpretation at the end of the day. You know what I mean? So I try to stay away from it, unless it's one of my passionate fighters, I guess, and you know how emotion gets in the way. But that's the long and short of it for me. There's a lesson in it for both of them, and they must take it and move forward.
I still say he didn't win the fight, but let's get into the main card. Main card, standout fights. I think for me, I'd have to say Michael Johnson versus Darius Flowers, simply because Michael Johnson is a knocked out artist. He has the most brilliant knockouts of him getting knocked out, not the other way around. And for me, he's one of my favorite fighters for that reason. And it was amazing to see him get the win. Brad Tavares, Gregory Rodriguez, Robocop, love Robocop. And then Dan Ige, Andre Fili, and Jack Hermansson. Which fight stood out for you? Actually, the whole main card was amazing. Actually, if I think about it,
exactly. I was
it
about
was
to
really
say.
good.
I was about to say the main card was excellent.
Yeah, it really was.
Michael Johnson showed some diversity, in terms of how he went about his fights. He showed some grappling. He showed some wrestling. Just to switch it up. I mean, he's a striker, yes. And what actually won him the fight, in my opinion, was the takedowns and the wrestling and getting that top time and
Top position.
like, because he showed a different skill set. I mean, he even complained about it. I mean, jokingly, at the end of the fight when he was interviewed, that, geez, I didn't know that you grapplers had to go through this much, to get to win fights.
He called it hell.
It shows growth in how he's going about, his business. It's his increased his skill set. Darius Flowers is no slouch by any, stretch of the imagination. So Michael Johnson did a good job in order to get the dub there, and he did extremely well. I think it was a UD, if I remember.
Decision. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a unanimous decision.
Unanimous decision. Yeah.
Yeah. So he did well there. I enjoyed that fight very well. The other fight I also enjoyed, as you say, Brad Tavares, and RoboCop. That was phenomenal. I mean, again, talking about the diversity of skill set. RoboCop is known as a jiu-jitsu practitioner, and that's what people announce him as. But he showed hands in that fight. He showed hands. He showed how he's actually multi-diverse in terms of how he goes about his business. And he went in there, decided that he's going to knock this guy out, and knocked him out. So beautiful performance by RoboCop. I think for me that is potentially fight of the night, just because of how he went about it. And it was a tough first round for him because Brad Tavares is a tough guy. He also has got a slow
Drickers
start.
wouldn't say that.
Yeah, I thought about it, but I thought about that when I watched the fight, and I was like, this is Drickus's daily bread. But let's give credit, to these fight. Drickus is the undisputed champ, so
At the end of the day,
it's levels. So but Brad Tavares is a resilient fighter. He can take some punches. He's got a good chin, but RoboCop went in there, and decided. He was like, I'm going to knock this guy out. Came out gunswinging, and did the business. So great fight, great performance from RoboCop for me.
let's talk about knockout artist Dan Eager. We were talking about Dan Eager, where we haven't really heard much from him. You called him 50K. It's still his nickname. I was like, oh yeah, Dan Eager. But damn, did he not show why he is called 50K? Second baby coming out. Last time he fought, baby was coming out. He had to rush.
Yep.
Once again, baby coming out. He made it within 30 seconds, knocked out his sparring partner, training partner, friend of his. Clean shot. Amazing performance from Dan Eager.
Another lesson in MMA, another beautiful lesson in MMA. The sport continues to teach us so much. Andre Touchy Feely, awesome nickname, by the way. Looked for the fight, called for the fight, in actual fact, based on what he saw in training. And there's a lesson there. One, it just talks about how the discipline and the mentality that fighters have to go with in training. When you're training, you're not looking to hurt someone. You're looking to brush up on your skills. You're looking to give certain looks, try certain things that you've been thinking about, and also spar according to the level of the fighter that your sparring partner. And that's exactly what Dan Ige was doing when he was training with Feely. But he thought, perhaps he was going hard and he saw an opportunity and he called for the fight. And did he get his
jaw handed
mouth
to
shut.
him.
Yeah, he got his mouth shut. And as I said, man, I love Dan Ige. I love his fighting style. I love his mentality. I love how he goes about his business. Beautiful striker, his beautiful technique, always beautiful to watch. In terms of how he goes about his business. And again, early finish, got it done quick, one and done, and a bonus just to, seal it.
Although I did also want to jump into Sean Strickland. When you're talking about sparring partners and sparring with the person that's with you, he sparred against a YouTuber and absolutely knocked the feathers off him without dropping him, which is ironic for someone who dropped Izzy. So yeah, you're quite right. Sparring to the level of the person you're sparring with is very important. Otherwise, you're just an asshole.
Yeah. 100%.
Yes, Sean Strickland, you are, but you like it like that, so we're good. And then the main card, Hermansson versus Pyfer. We both had it for Pyfer. Mr. I hit as hard as Ngannou because I hit the power bag at the PI and it came higher than Ngannou's. That fight didn't go as we thought. What did you think of that fight?
Great fight. In terms of entertainment, people got a 4-5 rounds. Pyfer got going off the blocks very quickly, but Hermansson showed his experience and saw the fight through to get the dub and to kind of get his fight record back on track in terms of his path to getting into the top 10. So very good performance from Hermansson.
And keeping his number 11. I think, the odds definitely were not in our favor on that one. Went completely against us. But yeah, it was an amazing fight. I think Pyfer will come back stronger. Hermansson will definitely come back more confident in his next fight, which ever it is. And I am definitely happy to say that I called 5 out of the 6 fights correct. World Sport Betting, I'll say it again. Give us a sponsorship. We're good at this. It's just a pity the Pyfer fumbled our collective bag. But moving on to collective bags, we have the fight featherweight champion Volkanovski versus Topuria, UFC 296 tomorrow night. No, sorry, this is coming Saturday. Really excited about this one. Wow.
Yeah.
Finally it's happening.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about this fight card?
Yeah, all the talk is going to be done. It's been amazing. The fighters on this card have just been playing quite well in terms of all the social media. I mean, Topuria's made a docu where road to the belt, and he's going to release it after the fight night, which is very confident of him. He's even changed his IG status to featherweight champion. It's there. And then on the other side, you've got Volk, who's shot the video. He did a sketch where he showed he's too old. Beautiful acting. It's just so I love how guys are just really getting into that character. But in terms of the fights, the matchmaking is beautiful on this one. Topuria has been really going about his business and going through that that featherweight division very well. I mean, obviously there's always arguments against who should get the next title fight, but Topuria is hot, on a trail, and he's shown that he can go about his business quite emphatically. He's good on his hands. The matchmaking is good in terms of styles, making fights. This is going to be a banger. Both guys are going to want to prove a point, so we should see a great stand and bang fight.
It's going to be an amazing fight. I think we're not going to go into the full card. We're going to have a full prediction show on this one, but the card is absolutely stacked. The top fight in the prelims is a ranked fight between number 3 and number 7, Amanda Lemos versus Mackenzie Dern. Every fight on the main card is for a position in the top 15. Anthony Hernandez versus Roman Kopylov, who had a head kick win in his last fight. So I'm very excited to see more head kicks because we love kicking them in the head over here. But this fight card is fantastic. I think for me, the standout fight, other than the title fight between Topuria and Volkanovski, is I'm going to get it. Devashvili versus Cejudo. And I've been practicing his Merab's surname, really? So I don't know how I got that one wrong. Yes.
I think because I say it so much, it's become easier. It's Valishvili. And because he's just that's it.
There we go. And because he's so entertaining, that's why I like him.
Big fight. This is a main event fight, in my mind. But for me, it's a bit of a weird one for Merab, because he's done everything he can do to prove he's number one. It's almost like Charles Oliveira, having to fight for number one contender again. That's kind of how I feel about Merab. But Henry Cejudo has put himself in a position where he wants to have another title run, and there's obviously some beef with O'Malley potentially. With both fighters, in actual fact. So the person who wins this fight definitely fights the winner of Cheeto and Sugar. So it's a great fight. It's a great matchup. The smarts of a Henry Cejudo versus the aggression and go forward of Merab. It's an absolute banger as well. It's going to be a smart fight. Merab's going to have to smarten up. If you think about how, for example, when Henry Cejudo fought Aljo for the belt, and how Aljo had to adapt per round because of how the smarts were coming into play with Triple C in the cage. So Merab's going to be very smart. He's going to be very smart about how he goes about it if he wants to retain his number one contender position.
Although, with having to fight for the number one contender position, I think that one is very fair in terms of Merab, because it was his choice not to fight Aljo. So unfortunately, if you choose to go to the back of the line, you choose to go to the back of the line and fight a Triple C in order to get back into that position. So I'm happy to see him go up against Cejudo. I'm loving his content. Honestly, I was cool with Merab until I saw him wearing O'Malley's jacket after the last fight, and then O'Malley got really upset and went and that's when I became a fan. And right now, the content he's releasing on social media with regards to the build up to this fight has just made me a fan, to be honest. Marab,
Oh
I'm
man,
looking forward to seeing you in the ring. Let's go
yeah,
get it.
it's he's just become like you just love him with more and more videos that he's releasing. He literally earned his follow to me. Like I was keeping in touch of what he does, but I've actually now started following him, and it's just so dope, and
Entertainment.
it's just so entertaining. And he just go like I don't know who writes his scripts. I don't know if he writes it himself. He's brilliant. uh, you know, um, everything, man. Even everything. I don't want to go into it, but there's just so much he's done that is just so entertaining that makes you just love him more and more.
So true. And I mean, he is a fellow Georgian of fellow Georgian,
Yeah,
just like Topuri, and they
yeah,
might have a Georgian party afterwards. Who knows?
yeah,
But the
yeah,
fight
yeah.
after that, and that's number 2 versus number 3. The fight after that is Jeff Neal versus Ian Machado Gary, 8 versus 10. The future. I'm looking forward to this fight. Jeff Neal, obviously, last time out, he was against Shavkat Rakhmonov, and he lost to
Yeah,
Shavkat.
yeah.
I mean, honestly, Shavkat is crazy. 18 and 0 right now. So, okay, fine, he lost. Ian Machado Gary is another undefeated fighter. Now, Jeff Neal is almost becoming a gatekeeper of the top 5, if you will, now that they've put him against another undefeated fighter. How do you see this fight going?
I mean, no offense, but you've got to win fights to progress up. And if you don't win the fights progressing up, you're going to get put against people who want to come up. It's the nature of the beast. So I don't see too much wrong with that in terms of what he needs to do to keep his spot. He's got to earn every number is precious in the UFC rankings, and you've got to show like that you can earn it, just like Hermansson showed that he
I
needs
was
to
looking,
earn and keep his number. It's really that simple for me. Um, Ian Gary's a character, as we know. I mean, he's taken the Conor McGregor playbook and run with it. Sparring in Irish pubs, well, not sparring, doing punching like just like a workout in an Irish pub, which was very cool. But I think he's going to have to put his money where his mouth is and give us an incredible performance. It's really that simple for me. As with Dana, Dana, as I said, I keep on saying he lets you carve your own path, and this is another way for Ian Gary to get himself up in the rankings and get to be the talk of the town again. So all in his hands.
100%. I fully agree. Look, I'm an Ian Gary fan. Uh, as much as there was a little bit of controversy around his last fight, I supported him that fight simply because I agree with what he said. Neil Magny basically said, I'm going to beat my child. And he's like, why would you do that? And then I became a super fan. So I'm hoping Gary takes this one. Love Jeff
Yeah.
Neal, but I like Ian Gary. I don't like the whole Connor mimic thing, mini Connor, new Connor. But I think once he finds his flavor, he'll be something worth watching and sort of listening to in future. So I hope he has a good career, and I hope he takes this fight and continues on. The next fight, once again, on the card, though, we had one this past weekend. We have another one this weekend. One of those who was dropped and left in the dust by the current UFC middleweight champion, Robert the Reaper Whittaker versus Paulo Borrachinia's Secret Juice Costa. Ooh, the Secret Juice. I can't wait. He's had so many canceled fights. I think of all the fighters on the card right now, he's got one of the most, he's like on 6 canceled fights in the past 4 years or something. He's got so many canceled fights. Last time out, his fight got canceled because he got an injury. So I'm really looking forward. It wasn't an injury, sorry. It was a staph infection on his elbow.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to seeing Costa again. He hasn't been out in a while, but he is savage. His fight against Luke Rockhold, when he's smothered his blood all over Luke Rockhold's face. I mean, he's just another individual that's also very entertaining on social media. How do you see this fight going?
Yeah, as you said, he's an entertainer. He's a guy that is loved by a lot of people, man. He's just one of those guys that is a character, and we all love him. My my worry, though, is what you've just alluded to, and that was my thoughts, is that you haven't fought in a while and you're coming out to fight someone who's got a chip on his shoulder, that has learned that you cannot take anybody for granted. Well, I guess that's what he said when he lost against Strickers. And so that lesson will be even more inflated now that Paulo Costa's come into the fray. Paulo Costa's a contender, is a serious contender, in actual fact, in the middleweight division. So it's a very, very good fight. It can go a long way in talking, in kind of seeing how this thing plays out. Because they could each earn themselves a title shot. If you think about, what's happening, with that top two, top three, anything can happen there. And if one of them wins this fight, they put themselves straight in contention. If Izzy or Sean Strickland, something happens, they are straight in contention for that fight. It's that simple. So big stakes. I would go for Rob the Reaper here, just because he needs to prove a point and he needs to make sure that he's learned his lesson from the previous fights and executes. He's got more tools, in my mind. So therefore, and he's got more experience, and therefore I think he'll win.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave that one there. I don't have an opinion. Let's just say Whitaker has it in the odds. Cool. And then we've already talked about the main fight tonight, book Konovsky versus Topuria. Wait, I say Topuria. How do you pronounce it?
Topuria, yeah. Right.
Okay, cool.
Ilya Topuria.
Odds have it dead even. Even the odds don't know who's gonna win. That fight is gonna be intense. That fight's gonna be insane. And if Volkanovski wins, he definitely goes into contention for, well, I'm not sure about the GOAT, because he tried to go up twice and didn't quite make it. Do you see him going back up again at some point in his career? Because he is, as we know, he's over 35. If he takes this one, then he's been the longest standing champion in the wild and featherweight division. Do you see him going up again for the title at lightweight if no one can beat him? Let's say Topuria doesn't defeat him, the next contender doesn't defeat him. Do you see him going up again?
So it doesn't warrant it to be. Let's start with the fight first. I think he proves a point. He's come off a loss against Islam of that head kick again.
Kick him in the head. That's right. The memes were glorious.
So he's got a point to prove. He's got a chip on his shoulder, and we know when Volk fights with a chip on his shoulder, he's going to put on a performance, especially with all the stuff that Topuria has been doing, behind the scenes. I think he goes about this in a very emphatic way, in actual fact. It's going to be a tough fight, but I think Volk has got the smarts. He's got the experience. He can adjust. And because of that, he takes the dub. And it's a KO even for me. It's a TKO or KO. Round 4.
I'm not going to make my call now. I'll wait for the prediction show, but it's going to be an amazing fight.
Yeah.
With that said, UFC 296 is going to be great. But what's also great is the next part of the show, which is definitely my favorite. Do you know what time it is? I think you know what time it is.
Of course I know
what time is it. What time is it? Fighter of the week. Let's go. Okay.
Yep.
So this week, you got to go first last week. So this week, I'm going to go first with my fight of the week. And we've already spoken about my fight of the week. And my fight of the week is Merab Velashvili. Definitely Merab. Why? Because of his entertainment value and the fact that he stepped back to say, listen, I don't necessarily want to fight my best friend, sparring partner, Aljo. I'm going to hang back and wait until I get my opportunity. So having done that and then just being so entertaining, and with what he's done after the infamous O'Malley jacket theft, after Aljo beat Cejudo, for me, since then, it was like, oh, so wait, who is that guy? And then you see the video of him jumping into a frozen lake and busting his head open. Then you see the video. That's one of my favorites. Then you see the video of
Yeah.
him. I saw it recently. I call it slap therapy that Cejudo was giving to Figgy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And his version, and just all of those things. He's now gotten one of Cejudo's coaches, and he did an entire video. So for me, his entertainment value, his social media presence, his social media acumen in terms of just generating interest in him and seeing him fight, for me, has to be my fighter of the week, because I love when people can actually activate social media, especially fighters, because it's very important for their career. It's very important that people want to see them fight, because that's what gets them to showcase their skills. Because obviously just being in social media doesn't help. Otherwise, you're Dylan Dennis. We don't want more of those. So definitely Merab, Devashvili.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good pick. As you say, the entertainment value is there, and he's kind of almost like, as you say, he's kind of let his gym, partner, and very good friend, have his spotlight, and he really didn't do anything to kind of shine a light on him. It's only when, he's now, forging his path onto the title that he's really just kind of shown who he is, just so that people don't get confused about who's trying to get the spotlight here, and so that's a man's man, so I definitely agree with you. He's a good fighter, even above that. There's the social media aspect, and there's the whole, enjoying how he goes about, the skits that he does. Very entertaining. I think my favorite one was when he was talking about who fights who. Then this guy's going to fight this guy to avenge him, and then he's going to. That was a like, I mean, like I was a like, when someone, it's smart and funny, so that's what I enjoy about his skits. So definitely agree with you on your fighter. My fighter of the week has got to be Alexander the Great Volkanovski, the Great, and he's the Great for a reason. He is out and out the best featherweight that has ever hit the planet Earth, and he continues to prove it with his tear. He's disposed of one of my favorite fighters, Max Blessed Holloway, 3 times, man, and that's very heartbreaking for me to admit. But he's earned it. He's earned the title. It's what I was talking about when I talk about a John Jones, when I talk about a GSP. When you talk about Khabib, he sits in that table. You mention him with those names because of what he's done in the division and how he's gone about it. He's gone about it, emphatically, because he is just so supreme in his skill set, how he executes his game plans, and how he just shows that he's a level above everyone. I mean, if you think about even how he went up to Islam, and I mean, Islam's not a 155 guy. Just let's get that out the way. He cuts his weight to 155, but he could easily be fighting at 170. So technically speaking, he's fighting a guy that's very much bigger than he is, and he still got to do what he did with him in that first fight. Because he's a smart fighter, because he knows what he needs to do. He understands his strengths, he knows his weaknesses, and he's a fighter. He's a fighter's fighter, and he's a fighter. So that's my man of the week. That's my fighter of the week.
Although in the recently we found out that in the lead up to his second fight against Makhachev, he was drinking for 4 weeks straight every day. And to be honest with you, when I looked at his physique at that fight, I was wondering, I was like, this doesn't look like the Volk that we know. And I guess it made sense. I mean, you take a short notice fight because when you take a short notice fight, it happens. So I'm personally looking forward to seeing him go up again and challenge for something. Because I really think that he can do it. The first time, it is what it is. And the second time, it is what it is, but I really think that, and I wouldn't say this for most fighters. Most fighters, I'd be like, what are you doing? Stay where you are, do what you're doing, keep getting your dubs, whatever. But for him, that's a great pick. That's an absolutely phenomenal pick.
Yeah.
Speaking of picks, UFC 300 is coming up, and we're not 100% sure who they're going to pick in the main card. Dana White seems to be struggling with picks in terms of who is going to headline UFC 300. They've got a stacked card, but no main event. What do you think is going on in the background? Because he says it's absolutely crazy and literally everything could change at any moment. But who do you think he's thinking about? We know John Jones is out because he said, look, they asked me, but I'm just not ready. Who else would be in that role of
Yeah,
headline?
I think to your point, yeah, it's you know the issue with UFC 300 is that most of the fighters are taken elsewhere or out. If you think about how he set up the beginning of the year, how he set up, Tuporia versus Volk, he
Yeah, this
set up
card is crazy.
Sean O'Malley versus Cheeto, he set up all of that stuff. Yes, those wouldn't have been UFC 300, main event fights, but you kind of put yourself in a corner because if you think about the process of elimination, he doesn't have that much left. He's got a Leon Edwards potentially that is not, if you think about the choices, that this is kind of, so first of all, it's going to be a man's main event. It's not going to be, unfortunately, it's not going to be a woman's main event because Dana just doesn't see it that way in terms of UFC 300.
But out of curiosity on that one, if it was a women's fight, who would you put? Amanda Nunes is gone, and there was no one else to challenge her, anyways. But female fights,
there's only one fight then. It's Shevchenko and Grasso. That's the only one you can put on that because it was a great fight for Mexico. I mean, was it called Mexican? Yes, Mexican Independence Day. That fight was a phenomenal fight. In 5 rounds, I thought Bullet did what she needed to do to win that fight. The judges, and again, topic of judges, saw it differently, and I have to respect it. I thought Bullet did everything there. So that fight is very entertaining. Unfortunately, you don't have much more options in the women's any of those divisions, to be honest.
unless they manage to snag Clarissa Shields from PFL or something
Yeah,
spectacular like
I
that.
mean, possible fights. Clarissa Shields is on the PFL versus Bellator card as we speak. That's in Riyadh, but that's another topic for another time. So possible fight. There's only that one fight that you can put in a women's fight. Zhang is a great fighter. We love Zhang Weili. Everybody loves Zhang Weili. No one doesn't love Zhang Weili. But it's not a main event. Sorry, UFC 300 main event fight. So it's not. So if you do it by process of elimination, sorry, you want to say something?
What if Joanna Jacek comes back?
Still not UFC 300 status. It's the fights below that. Those fights are more intriguing for me. We've seen Joanna. We've seen what Zhang Weili can do. Joanna, she's gonna have her looking like a,
a Klingon.
We've seen that, and we've seen the dominant fighters. So it's not UFC 300 main event worthy. I have no issue against women and how they fight. I enjoy women's fights. I really do. It's not a diss on women. It's just that where the sport is and the stature of this specific event, it requires something that's going to pull. It's a pay-per-view. People need to pay to want to see that fight. And if it's not in that caliber, then I don't think so.
So there have been whispers that it might just be Elon Musk versus Mark Zuckerberg. Whispers. Would that make it a worthwhile main event for you?
Not for fight fans, but I guess for the progress of the sport, potentially, yes. It's a good sell, obviously. It's a good sell. They've got their respective millions of followers. It's an intriguing, thing. It's purely for entertainment and intrigue. They definitely sell, and they'd reach more than just the fight fans. The pool, would be so much more. It would be a seriously high grossing pay-per-view if they would do that. That, as much as it's not a good fight, it would be 300 worthy, because if you think about the progression of the sport, if you think about progression of the world, with where things are going. I know, Dana says he doesn't do gimmicky fights and then he's going to rush and try and find these sort of fights. Anyway, because it's money at the end of the day. Stop kidding me. You're not fooling me. you're looking to do a money fight, and that's a money fight. You can definitely get that.
Although, in from what he said, that fight wouldn't be a gimmicky fight. A gimmicky fight is MMA crossover to boxing for no reason, in his definition. For him, this is just it's a real fight between two amateurs. Basically, that's essentially what
blah,
he would he would
blah,
bill it as.
blah. Like it's come on, Dana. I mean, if you've watched the sport long enough, you know, I mean, let's not go into it. I don't want to, like, I don't like speaking, you know, it's like I try to keep a clean, ethical line in terms of how I speak about people. But that one, I cannot sit here and nod amicably, knowing the type of person that puts these sort of things. I mean, I'm not even going to go into the slap. I think let's
Yes,
move
let's not
from
go into slap. I'm sorry, I like
yeah,
slap. I'll be honest. I've been watching it with my kids this past weekend. Even the goat Sheena Bothary, she got knocked out, but it was illegal. It was clubbing. Anyway, we can go into into slap.
really, that's
Oh,
very
dude,
interesting.
I watched.
Very interesting.
It's anyways. Yeah.
Another topic for another time.
Another
So I
topic for
mean,
another time.
maybe to finish your question, if you've got a process of elimination, if you go about it, heavyweight John Jones is out, so you've only got an Aspinall left versus something, and you're not going to have a non-title fight because again, we've seen what that creates with UFC. You know, with Tom Aspinall thinking now he's got the right to call out John Jones, so that's out. You know, light heavyweight. Pereira's not going to fight. It's not main event 300 worthy. If you go down middleweight, Drickers could fight Izzy. That's a big fight. That's UFC 300 worthy. That's an option. And then if you come down welterweight, it's Leon Edwards and Bilal. Yes, but also no. You know, Leon Rocky is one of my favorite fighters. I've got two favorite fighters in the UFC, and that's him and Charles Oliveira. But another story for another time. You know, so I put my bias aside, despite the fact that I love Rocky. It's not UFC 300 worthy. Islam's not going to fight because of where he is. You know, and then you kind of, you know, so he actually has put himself in a corner. He does not have options. The only feasible option he has, you know, besides Zuckerberg and Musk,
I'm rooting for that
is literally Drickers and Izzy. Obviously, we want that fight to come here, but because he does not have options, that's the fight to make for UFC 300.
And both fighters would most likely take it because A, it's UFC 300, B, it's headlining, C, it's money because this is one of the biggest pay-per-views, and even just the number 300 throws you back to the movie. And yeah, I'm pretty sure someone in the fight is going to do the Leonidas kick at some point on that fight night.
I mean, if you remember, I mean, I don't know if you remember, Izzy did hint, you know, when he did the 300 post. So perhaps there was something in the works. But I think Dana's painted himself into a corner, unfortunately, with this one. And nothing is going to be better than Izzy and Duplessis based on the options he has.
Dana in the corner. Now, strangely enough, Dana White was in a corner on a podcast, Howie Mandel's podcast. And if you don't know who Howie Mandel is one of the judges, former judges on America's Got Talent, very famous American entertainment personality, and he has a podcast. And Dana White went onto his podcast, and Howie Mandel did the introduction. He said, Dana, thank you for coming. We love your work. You're a philosopher. You're this, that, and the other. Wonderful. Dana looked at him and said, thank you for the kind words, but I can't do any more podcasts. I'm sick and tired of it. And he took off his earphones and he walked out. Now, that is fascinating, especially when we're talking right now about UFC 300 and the fact that he seems to be out of options. Now he's essentially said, listen, I'm done with podcasts. I'm not doing podcasts. We here at Kick Him in the Head are never going to get to speak to Dana White. Why? Because Dana White doesn't do podcasts anymore. What do you think prompted him to go to that space of saying, listen, I'm done with podcasts? What do you think it is? Do you think it might be the history he has with podcasts? If you look at the relationship he has with Errol Helwani of the MMA Hour, which is one of the premier MMA podcasts where everyone goes, all his fighters go there, or most of his people go there. What do you think? Where do you think that came from with the sudden attrition, the sudden distaste, dislike, disinterest in the podcasting space, which we all know is media? He set up, what's her name? Nina Marie Daniel. She's not quite a podcaster as such, but if I look at that, it wasn't necessarily strange, but it was definitely unexpected, especially on someone who's just said, hey, look, we love your stuff. Welcome. It was a very odd time for that. What do you think's happening?
One word: pressure. UFC 300 is turning out to be something that he can't wave his magic wand and wave it successfully. The issue is he's pulled every hat out of every bag to try and get this done, and he is just not winning. The frustration and the pressure that comes from that has gotten to him. That's the reason for me. If you think about even the podcasts prior to this one, he was talking about, I just can't remember who it was, but he was talking about how, you guys, while you were setting up, I was on the phone trying to set this up. It's crazy. There's so many, things going on, and we're really just trying to make it work. So you can spin it that way, but you can only spin so much, because what else was he going to say, excuse me, at that podcast to make me think differently of where this card is going? At some point, I'm going to be like Dana, out with it. And he said, if I would have had it, I would have been out with it already. And that's honest. I appreciate that. But everybody's going to want to know this specific question. And he is tired of answering it because he does not have an answer anymore. The pressure's gotten to him, and he's like, nah, can't do this anymore. I'm out. Because the question was coming, and he was needed to have an answer, a plausible answer at that. And he doesn't have one.
It's going to be interesting to see where he goes next, specifically around how he engages media outlets, whether it was just, as you said, a pressure issue, or whether it was something deeper around how he then intends on engaging the media going forward. Because now this is slightly away from MMA, but if you look at the trend of podcasts, etc., there are so many out there right now. Literally everyone has a podcast. Everyone. I have a podcast. Everyone has a podcast. So maybe him walking away from such a high-profile podcast might be the podcast bubble bursting, for all we know, because there are that many out there now, such that the market is so saturated that the question then can easily become, but where's the value for me as the person who's on the podcast? I go to all these podcasts, and then what? So it's just very interesting to see that was that's the current line he's taking. But I think you might be quite right. It might just be pressure from 300 not really working out. The last podcast interview he did was like 2 days before that or something ridiculous, and now it's going to be the same thing again, same questions, same. For what purpose? We've got the answers. Why are we going through this again? So that'll be quite interesting. But that brings us to the end of this show. Lusindiso, bro, where can people find you as always?
The handle is right there. Now, this is the handle that I've opened up to just try to be more social. I'm a private guy, as I said in one of my previous shows, but I'm trying to, have a channel where I can open up and talk about, all sorts of things that are happening in my life, whether it's MMA, whether it's threads, whether it's music, whether it's culture. That's the space I've opened up for my creativity. And that's where you can find me.
Don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe on all our platforms at Headkickpod. Follow Lusindiso, see what he's up to, get a feel for the culture. But until next time, don't forget to, let's go, Lou. Kick him in the head. That's right. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, and we'll chat again soon.
All right. Thanks, brother. Always a pleasure.